Working in the Develop module in Lightroom, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into color. We worked with white balance to sort of balance this image out. But now we want to kind of fine tune things. And so we're going to go in and look at hue, saturation, lightness, and color in here. And we're also going to go into a little bit about color grading in the image. So with hue, saturation, and lightness, we can choose a color or a hue of colors. We can click on this rainbow one here, and it'll bring all of our colors up. And in each color, we have the ability to adjust the hue, the saturation, and the luminance. When we talk about the hue, we're really talking about where on the color wheel that we're looking at, and we can kind of slide the color around on the color wheel. When we talk about saturation, we're talking about the intensity of the color, right? We can desaturate it and make it less intense, or we can saturate it and make it more intense. And when we talk about luminance, we're talking about lightening or darkening the colors. So we can do this color by color. I'm going to kind of start with the sky. In my white balance, I really wanted to neutralize the sky out, but I couldn't do it without altering the rest of the image. But now I can come down to my blues. I can do it in this long column with all the colors, or I can just click on the blue and have my blue sliders here. And you can see that if I slide my hue around, it's going to change the hue of my sky. As I move to the left, it's going to go more towards green. And as I move to the right, it's going to go more towards magenta. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the hue alone, and maybe I'm just going to play with the saturation. So I can take the saturation slider and I can saturate the color, or I can desaturate the color. And when I slide it all the way to the left, it takes all of the color out of the sky. There's my gray clouds that I wanted. But now that I'm looking at it, they look a little bit too gray, right? There should be some color in there. So I can bring my saturation up a little bit and just introduce a little bit of that blue in there. And they look a lot more natural that way. They look like they should be that color, like they look like gray clouds. There's a little switch here next to the in line where the hue, saturation, and lightness title is. And I can turn that on and off and see what my changes are. So you can see that when I made that move, it really did just sort of take that blue cast out of the sky, which I think I really like. Now, if there was something else that I wanted to adjust, like maybe the greens, the bushes and the grass in there, because they all look a little bit yellow. If I slide the hue to the left, it makes them more yellow. And if I slide it to the right, it makes them more green, right? And you can see that it gets really specific in there. This green is really only being seen up here in this center section of the image. And so I can make that a little bit more green up there. I can actually use my luminance too and maybe make that look a little bit lighter or a little bit darker. It's a very subtle move, but that subtlety is kind of nice. So I can brighten that green up just a little bit in there. And then when I look at the rest of this image, I'm probably hitting more in the yellows. So I'm going to jump to the yellows and I'm going to crank the saturation and see and crank it all the way down. So now you can totally see that when I took the saturation all the way down, it's really affecting that part of the grass there. So I'm going to bring my saturation back up to 0 by double clicking on saturation. And I am going to move my hue more towards the greens. So you can see if I go all the way, there's all the areas that it's affecting and it's making them green. If I wanted to see that without pushing it quite all the way, I could hold down the Option key. And as I do that, it kind of over accentuates everything that I'm doing. And when I let go of it, it'll take that over accentuation off. So I can make those just a little bit more green. I think I'm going to desaturate those just a touch, just to kind of take that intensity of that area down. And so now you can see if I flip back and forth, again, it's a pretty subtle little move, but it's made this lawn area over here, right in here, a little bit greener and a little bit less intense. And so that would be my hue, saturation, lightness. We can come in, I'll come into this other image over here and we can see, like on this one, the green of the lawn, it looks a little bit blue and it looks a little bit green, like a little too green. And so I think I'm going to slide my hue over and take a little bit of that blue out and make that grass a little warmer and a little brighter. And then maybe I'll take my saturation down just a little bit, just to kind of eliminate some of the intensity on that grass. And I can maybe bring my luminance down a little bit and make it dark. I'm going to go really far just to kind of see. And then I'll maybe take it somewhere in there. So now I've just sort of set that grass back just a little bit. You can see here it kind of has a little bit of a glow, like a neon-y glow, that we may not have really noticed before, but now that we've adjusted it and it looks a lot more sort of normal, now you can kind of see it. Another thing that I can do is I can come into the reds and I can kind of play around with the brickwork, right? If I push the saturation way up or pull the saturation way down, I'm really kind of affecting those bricks. It looks like the red is only doing a portion of them, and so my orange might be doing the rest. And I can kind of see when I slide the saturation up that those bricks are really coming across as more of an orange tone than a red tone. And I can fix that with my hue, right? I can slide it more towards the green or more towards the red. So I can kind of make them a little bit more red. I can maybe take their saturation up just a little bit, and I'm going to go before and after. It's a fairly subtle look, but it really does kind of intensify the reds that are going on in there. And so that's our hue, saturation, and lightness moves that we can do. They're very specific. They're very color specific. They get in and kind of let you really tweak the details on it. The difference with color grading is that it's a much more overall kind of move that we're going to make. We can adjust by looking at the midtones, highlights, and shadows down here, or we can go just the shadows, just the midtones, and just the highlights and look at that. Or we can do a global move on the whole image. And what this is really is that we can take this little dot in the center and we can just slide it around, and you can see that it adjusts whatever's going on in the image. And it kind of lets us add a color tint to it. This is the global one. So let's go back and we'll bring up the 3 and we'll kind of look at it. So we can work midtones, right? This is affecting the shadows and the highlights less and the midtones more. And you can see it kind of moves pretty quick in here, but if I hold down the Option key, it moves at a much slower, more controllable rate. So let's make the midtones in this. I'm going to take it on the warmer side, sort of in the orangey reds. And then we can kind of play with the brightness and the darkness of it. We can play with really sort of how bright or how dark we want that part of the image to be. So this is just lightening or darkening the midtones of our image. We can do the same thing for the shadows. So I think on the shadows on this, I'm going to kind of go a little bit nuts, and I'm going to move this down and make the shadows a little bit cooler. And then I think I'm going to take the highlights and sort of exaggerate them to the warmer. So we're sort of getting this sort of cross process look, or this split tone look that's going on in our image. The other thing that we have to do on these is that if we hold down the Option key, it moves it slower. If we hold down the Shift key, it'll only move it in and out on saturation, how much saturation there is. The closer to the center you are, the less saturated the color is going to be. The closer to the edge you are, the more saturated the color is going to be. And you can see that that line comes up, and I can't move it off of that line. It'll only go in and out from the center to the edge. And if I hold down the Control key, then, the Command key. If I hold down the Command key, Control on a PC, if I hold down the Command key, then it'll only shift around on my hue. The saturation will stay the same, but it'll only go around in a circle on the hue and change what color I'm choosing. So I can kind of fine tune things that way as well. So you can see I can do the same thing with the Command key on a Mac, Control on a PC over here, and find that what I want. Maybe we'll play with the midtones a little bit more. No, I think I kind of liked them in there. So we can kind of grade our image and create what we want to create. We have a blend mode down here, and we can blend this more intense or less intense effect of those colors. And on this one too, if you hold down Option, it'll really overdo it. So you can really see what it's doing to the extreme. And then when you let go, it'll kind of reapply. So if I wanted less of the effect of it, I'd slide down this way. If I wanted more of the effect, I would slide to the right. So I think I'm going to go with a little bit more of the effect. Now, with the balance, what we're talking about on the balance here, this slider down at the bottom, is we're talking about if we slide it to the left, it's going to favor the shadows. Remember, we made the shadows cooler on our grading. And if we slide to the right, it's going to favor the highlights, which we made warmer. So we can make these cool shadows, but then we can sort of slide the slider a little right and favor the highlights a little bit more. So that coolness is still in there, but it's not as intense as it was before. So color grading really works on a more global scale, and our hue, saturation, lightness is really a way to get in there and sort of pick out the detail of what we're doing.